All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to 1,000 Shimmering Lights. As always, 1,000 Shimmering Lights is the online planetarium live stream where you are the planetarium director. Everything I'm going to talk about is based on your suggestions, your questions, and lately I've been doing a lot of themed episodes, but no theme tonight. We're just going to do a excuse me. We're just going to do a hangout like we usually did in the past because I didn't think of a theme. I got a lot going on actually, but a couple things I do want to note. First of all, I'm getting over some kind of a cold, so you might hear that in my voice, and I'm still getting these like coughing fits, and I just ran out of cough drops. I'm about to go get some more after the stream, but I'm gonna try and use lots of water to get through it. Um, and then secondly, let's go ahead and do our usual housekeeping, beginning of the stream type stuff. And I want to talk a little bit about the Astronomy Club. So I am a member of the Northeast Florida Astronomical Society, no longer on the board of directors. Stepped down recently and was replaced by a member named Pearl, who's doing a fantastic job. But I am still affiliated with the club, and I'm always going to promote the club. So if you live in the Jacksonville area and you are not already a member of NEFIS, seriously consider looking into NEFIS. If you are into astronomy, uh, especially if you have a telescope and you want to get into actually observing, joining an astronomy club is the best way to go about becoming an observer. I have become a much better observer since joining the club. Most people in our club would say the same. You grow so much. Astronomy really is a team sport. I always say it's a team sport. It's a team activity. Get out with other people, learn the tips and the tricks, and grow. Uh, and if you're not somebody who's looking to do your own observations, but you're interested in the science of astronomy, then look into our club because our events are great places to show up and look through telescopes and learn about space and have a great time. We do a lot of volunteer work. We are a nonprofit organization. If you are interested in becoming a part of NEFIS and what we do, or just supporting us in what we do have memberships. If you go to nefis.org, NEFIS, of course, stands for Northeast Florida Astronomical Society. And you can go to the membership tab and then hit Join NEFIS. I just realized if I'm speaking a little loud, I can't hear myself that well because of the drainage into my ears. So if I just caught myself and I felt like I was kind of straining, I don't know if I was being loud or if it's just my throat, but I apologize if I am. But this is the membership application, so new or renew, fill out all the info, blah, blah, blah. You can pay through PayPal, and you select your membership level. Students and seniors, so anyone with a student ID, anyone over 55, $20. These are yearly membership dues, by the way. So that's $20 for the entire year. An individual, which is just some guy like me, is $40. Families are $50. A family to NEFIS is any two adults and whoever they happen to be in charge of. So we don't get super specific on what counts as a family. We love all families. We want you to be part of our family. $50 for a family membership. Benefactor and corporate are just ways to give more money. So corporate is if you want to sponsor NEFIS and be advertised in any newsletters we might do, or just, you just want to give a large amount because you just really believe in the mission of the club. It's just a way that you can give more money. Benefactor is more for like an individual person who just wants to give more money. You don't actually get anything different for being a benefactor than you get for being a member, other than just the satisfaction of helping us do good work. And then our newsletter has a section where we thank the benefactors. And sometimes we'll do special things like if we do like a giveaway at a meeting, that we do like a raffle, benefactors might get 2 tickets instead of 1. All right, so we sometimes do little things like that. But for the most part, all the same benefits of being a member, the same benefits of being a benefactor, which mostly includes things like, again, like mostly it's about supporting the club because most of the things the club does are free. You can come to any of our events for free. You can come look at our observing site for free. So joining is really just about being a part of it and supporting us and the organization and helping us to be able to organize these things. But also, if you're a member of NEFIS, you are additionally a member of the Astronomical League, so you don't have to buy that membership separately. And we do have other programs, like we have a telescope loaner program where you can check out a telescope for a month and bring it back, and it's not some little hobby killer thing. We're talking 6-inch Dobsonian telescopes and other options as well. And then we have this new one. This is the group rate. So this was something we were talking about when I was membership director, but didn't really get implemented until after I stepped down. It looks like Pearl has actually kind of hashed this out. So basically, if you have a large group of people of an organization of some kind, like a really good example is like a Boy Scout troop or a Girl Scout troop or a homeschooling group or something like that, you can join as a group. You only get one Astronomical League membership, so every single person in your group isn't a member of the Astro League. That's actually true of the family membership as well. But it is a cool way to get your entire group affiliated with NEFIS and to enjoy some of the benefits of it. So, like, again, your whole group is basically treated like one member. So, like, if you have a Boy Scout troop and you all join, you, as a troop, you could check out a telescope, right? And that's only $5 per member of your group. So if you've got a troop of like 60 people, I should be better at this. $300, right, would be the membership due for a year for that whole group. So that allows us to work more closely with organizations like the Scouts, the homeschooling groups. I'm blanking. I know there's other examples, but you get the idea, etc. Here's your designate. Who is the group? If you click group, it's gonna ask you about your group, and then how'd you hear about us and such, and then you can pay through PayPal, so it's nice and easy. Okay, cool. And Cooper says I'm not being loud, which is good. So, oh boy, it looks like our viewers have gone up in the last couple of seconds. So if you are here, introduce yourself, say hi. I'm just talking about the club real fast, and then we will dive into astronomy stuff. Taking a look at our calendar, let's talk about some of the upcoming events. So for one thing, this weekend is the NEFIS members Star Party. This is, if you're just now hearing about this, basically it's too late. This is only available to members, and this is a trial run with the Gold Head State Park to basically prove the viability of us being able to do these star parties in the future. So as part of the arrangement with the park, everybody who goes to this needed to have already submitted. Like I said, if you're just now finding out, it's too late, but would have to have submitted their information for a background check, because part of the arrangement is we get to have the star party, but they get to advertise to all the other people camping at the campground, because it is a campground, that we're there. And on one night of that weekend, NEFIS is going to do a star party outreach event. Sorry, this is a star party. They're going to do an outreach event for all the campers to come and participate. So they wanted background checks on the people who are going, and they wanted to limit it to just members. Depending on how this goes, this might open up a little bit more in the future, but we'll see. But that's this weekend, so fingers crossed. Good weather, good luck, a good turnout for that. I won't actually be going, because I will be in Orlando this weekend for my sister's wedding. Pretty excited about that, but it means I won't be there. This Saturday is also an opportunity for the dark site observing sessions, but because it overlaps with our star party, I'm not going to hold my breath on a lot of people going to this. But this is a thing we do every month on the Saturdays closest to last quarter and new moon. This is not an outreach session. It is open to the public because we don't own the land or anything, and we don't restrict who shows up, and we're friendly. We like it when people show up. You know, we're always willing. We don't gatekeep. We want to open the gates and let everybody come enjoy this hobby. But just bear in mind, if you do attend one of these sessions for the first time, it's not like going to our Hannah Park sessions or any of our other outreach. This one is not outwardly focused. It's inwardly focused. This is the people who are going to this, the club members who go to these sessions are there to make their own observations. This is the one thing we do for us, to get out under a truly dark sky, under good conditions, and log our own observations and do our own astronomy, right? Because we got into this hobby because it is our hobby, in addition to the education aspect. That said, though, as long as you're observing light discipline and you're being a cool guy and you're not being that guy, and you know who that guy is, you will find that people are very friendly, and you will often be asked to come look through the eyepiece and that kind of stuff. And you don't have to have a telescope to come. I brought my mom out there, and she just looked up. She just enjoyed it. You can see the Milky Way. It's incredible. I think everybody, at some point in their life, should get under a truly dark sky and see the Milky Way. Then next Saturday is Hannah Park. I do plan to be there for Hannah Park, hopefully with my whole voice at that point. This one is outreach. Hey, we've got wow, lots of people jumping in saying, "Hey, hi, Lisa, can kids go to NEPA's event at Mosh?" Absolutely, absolutely. The Mosh event. Oh, I think you're talking about the silent disco tonight. Check if you're talking about the one tonight at the silent disco. Check the Mosh website for the details on that, because it is a silent disco. It's kind of a club thing. I don't know if it's not open to kids, but normally our stuff is open to kids. Let me check actually and see. Excuse me. Mosh Jacksonville. I was about to bring up mosh pit stuff, which I mean, but not the kind of mosh I'm going for. Let's see here. Accept all. Also, Lisa, glad you're here watching the stream tonight. All right, so April 20th. Oh, it looks like they're doing. That's weird. I could have sworn we were doing a thing at the Mosh tonight because somebody asked me if I was going, and I can't make it. Oh, not tonight. That'd be tomorrow night. I can't make it. Here it is. The Stargaze Silent Disco is 21 plus. So good question. That is 21 plus. So unfortunately, not the kids for that one. But Jeff said nothing like a truly dark sky. Excuse the coughing, man. I'm getting over something. For those of you who just joined the stream, it's nothing like seeing the Milky Way without any telescope or anything. It's amazing. It really is, man. I get kind of poetic about it, but I genuinely I tell people, and I say this all the time, as a human being, that's our sky. That's the sky of the earth, right? Like, I kind of feel like that's your birthright as a human, to be able to see that sky. And the light pollution that ruins it, it kind of makes me angry, honestly. Like, imagine if somebody came into your lawn and started messing up your lawn. You'd be upset about that. People are messing up your sky, right? That sky, it's right above you all the time, but you can't see it because people aren't, when they're installing lights, there's simple things. You can shield the lights, point them down. But I think that, it's a natural part of our psychology as a species. I think if you get out there and you see a truly dark sky, and you see the sky just alive with stars and the Milky Way, using kind of poetic language here, it's good for the soul. It's good for your soul. I really think so. And yeah, I think everybody at least once in life should do it. And I really ought to do it twice at least. Once in the winter and once in the summer, so you can see the difference. Winter Milky Way is very thin and tenuous. Summer Milky Way is just very bright and big with lots of cool features. And that actually, Lisa just jumped right on what I was saying. Yeah, so Milky Way is available all year round. And you know what? Actually, normally I start off with some planetarium stuff, but we've already got great viewer questions. So let's just launch into the discussion, because that's what we're doing tonight. So let me bring up, I use Wikimedia Commons, by the way, for all my images, because this channel isn't monetized and I haven't paid for the rights to any of this stuff. So I'm going to always show you the attribution information for the image so that it's properly attributed. And if you do own any of these images, I'm just some guy. I'm not making any money. Don't sue me. All right, so so if I bring up an artist's impression of the Milky Way galaxy. So this is an artist's impression. Here's the attribution information. It's public domain from NASA, so we're cool there. Especially love, I think it's from NASA JPL. Especially love public domain stuff. So this is what the Milky Way galaxy that we live in would look like if you left the galaxy, right? If you were outside the galaxy looking down on the disk from above, it would look like this. So the stars are not just evenly distributed. They're in these spiral arms, right? And as you can see, there is a bar feature. If you didn't know, the Milky Way actually is a barred spiral galaxy. We now know that there is a bar feature stretched across the middle of it. Bar features are a really interesting trait of some spiral galaxies, and there's some active research going on into exactly how the bar forms, but they're really fascinating. Um, and then we have these sort of spiral arms. Now, we don't live near the middle of the galaxy. We actually live on something called the Orion Spur, which is like a little broken off bit of spiral arm partway between the Perseus arm and the Scutum Centaurus and Sagittarius arms. Now, if we zoom in on this picture a little, whoa, okay. But if we look here, here's the sun. Now imagine, obviously, if this were to scale, Earth is invisible at this scale, right? But I'm going to draw around, we're going to use this circle as if this were the orbit of the Earth, purely for the purposes of demonstration. So if you imagine that little circle, that's the orbit of the Earth. Now, obviously, the sky that we see at night is always going to be the sky pointed away from the sun, right? Looking at the sun, that's called daytime. You don't want to look directly at the sun with your eyes, but when the Earth is angled, our part of the Earth is pointed at the sun, we're experiencing day. Roll around to where we're looking away from the sun, that's nighttime, right? Which means that as we orbit the sun, I'm sorry, I keep jumping in and out here. But as we orbit the sun, what that window of nighttime is going to vary. So if we're here in the orbit, then we're going to look this direction, right? But the sun is going to keep us from seeing this way. If we roll around to this part of the orbit, we can see off in this direction, but not the other way, right? And through the orbit. So it just how happens to be that when the northern hemisphere of the Earth is experiencing summer and the southern hemisphere is experiencing winter, they flip, then the Earth is about here-ish in the orbit. And it also happens to be that when the northern hemisphere is experiencing winter and the southern hemisphere is experiencing summer, we are here-ish in the orbit. Now, what that means is during the winter time, since we're on this side of the orbit, we're looking this direction, which means that we are looking out through the Perseus arm and through some of the gaps here and out into deep space, right? So these are all the stars we see in the winter sky and then out into deep space. But in the summer, we're looking through here. So we're seeing all of this, but smushed because we can't see the depth of it, right? It's just all kind of, from our view, it all lines up on top of itself and is compressed into one gestalt of all of this, including the core, right? And these arms and all the stuff in between, to the point where we can't even really get a look at anything beyond this edge right here. So because of that, it means that in the wintertime, we're looking through a lot less stars. So the Milky Way is going to be much thinner, much fainter, right? And if you take long exposure photographs, a bit bluer, right? Because the stars near the core of the galaxy, we have a lot fewer of the blue stars in there, and we can talk about why that is as well if you're curious. So you get more blue color in this direction than the other way. In the summertime, the Milky Way is going to be wider. It's going to be a lot thicker, brighter, easier to spot. And then if you look as it goes across the sky, it's going to widen out at a certain point. And what you're actually seeing is if you look at the edge-on view of what the Milky Way would look like, it's got a bulge in the middle, right? So it's flat and then bulge in the center of the disk. So you could actually see that in the summertime. You can see the Milky Way actually gets wider. Additionally, if you get somewhere nice and dark, you can even see that there's gaps where there's like interruptions of the Milky Way, almost like there's stars here, a gap, and then more stars down here. And these sort of rifts kind of go through and snake through the Milky Way. And what those rifts actually are is what you're seeing in this image that look like these brown smudges, right? These are actually bits of higher concentrations of interstellar gas and dust that block the light of stars behind them. So the reality is, and when you're looking at the Milky Way in the summer and it looks like there's areas where there's holes in it, basically, there's actually just as many stars there as there is above or below. You just don't see them. They're being blocked as if, kind of like how a cloud in the sky will block the sun or the moon. These clouds are actually blocking a lot of these stars. So that's why summertime is a great time to view the Milky Way. So if you only ever get to see the Milky Way once in your life, do it in the summertime. If you get to go at least twice, do both seasons. I personally find that the summer Milky Way and the winter Milky Way each have their own unique beauty, right? there's something kind of special about that thin, tenuous, wispy aspect to the winter Milky Way that I find to just be very beautiful in its own sort of way. But if I'm being honest, the summer Milky Way, it puts on a show, man. So Lisa asked as well, and Jeff's kind of hopping on it too. Um, what season is best to see the Andromeda Galaxy? The Andromeda Galaxy is really mostly a winter object, which is interesting because the sort of like April through June period, that sort of springtime is, and into sort of July even, is like prime galaxy season, and I can talk about why that is as well if you guys are interested in. Um, but the Andromeda Galaxy is not a part of that big clump of galaxies that we see during that time. It's located elsewhere, and so we actually see it in the wintertime. This is a good time to actually bring up my planetarium software. So for anyone who's new to the channel, who's never seen my show before, I use Stellarium as my planetarium software. It is free of charge. It is made by and for astronomers, which means that all the deep sky objects and things you would want to look at during an observing session are in this software. You can actually use it to plan an observing session. It's not just like so. Look, there's like a lot of people show me like phone apps. Like, look, it points out constellations. I think those phone apps are awesome, but a lot of them they just show you constellations because they're just meant for like general use. Stellarium is meant for astronomy, so it's very robust. It's completely free. There's a downloadable version, and there's a web-based browser version. And for some reason, when I live stream over OBS, the downloaded version doesn't work as well, so I use the web one. This planetarium software, like all planetarium software and star charts, represents the brightness of objects by making them bigger, right? The only exception is the moon, which the moon and sun in this software are true size. They're depicted as their actual apparent size. All other objects you see in this software that are basically dots, the size of the dot correlates with the brightness. So that gives you an idea how bright Venus is, because look at the size of this dot. But anyhow, the other cool thing about the software is that I can set the date and the time, so I can time travel to whenever we want to go. And so with that, I'm going to time travel to the winter. So we're going to go to like February. February is a good time. And already here it is. If you're wondering what M31 is, M31 is the catalog number, Messier 31, for the Andromeda Galaxy. So asking about the Andromeda Galaxy, here it is. We're going to do a little bit of time traveling just to put it in a good position in the software to make it easier to look at. So this is what the sky would look like January 20th at 8 o'clock p.m. Right? That's what the sky here would be. And so here you see very prominent in the sky. The trick to finding the Andromeda Galaxy, if you ever want to locate it, is if I can add the lines to make it a little easier, there's this constellation right here called Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is a circumpolar constellation, meaning it's close to the pole star and kind of just sort of makes a circle around the pole star as the Earth turns and as the Earth goes through its orbit. So if you want to find Cassiopeia, look generally north, and it's going to be somewhere in the north. Right? You're always going to find it in the north. And in the winter time, when we want to try and find M31, it's going to be to the west of or to the left of the pole star, a.k.a. Polaris, a.k.a. the North Star. Now, if I remove the dots, you can see how easy this M still is to spot. And bear in mind that this software is basically representing what the sky looks like under phenomenal viewing conditions. Most of the time, a lot of these dimmer stars aren't there, and Cassiopeia is even easier to spot, stands out even more strongly in a more light-polluted sky. That is one advantage, I will say, to light pollution. If you're learning constellations for the first time, finding the bright, easy ones that you're going to use to find the dimmer ones is actually easier if you start under light-polluted skies and learn what they look like, and then adjust to more light-polluted skies where there's more dots, basically. They're going to make it harder to find. But anyway, once you find this M, what you're going to look for is the M has a tall part and a squished part, right? So the tall part of the M, and it sometimes is a W, depending on where it is, right? The tall part of the M, we want to imagine shooting through that like an arrow through a bow, right? Just right through there, and it points right at this reddish star here called Merak. I've talked about red stars a lot on the show, and when I do my live things with the laser pointer, I often will ask people, can anyone tell me what it means if a star is red? And it means that it's dying. Right? Red stars are dying stars. They swell up and they turn red. So Mirac is a dying star. Now, granted, dying, I mean, they can often take hundreds or even thousands of years in that state before they pop, but they do eventually pop. Once you find Mirac, you can hop 1 star, 2 stars over. If I zoom in, you can see there is another star here. Kind of hard to see because the software is trying to be helpful and point out Andromeda Galaxy. This 3rd star can be a little faint, so it could be a challenge under subideal skies. And then once you found that star, if you point your telescope at it and kind of explore in the neighborhood a little bit, as you can see very close by, we have Messier 31, also called the Andromeda Galaxy. Now, the Andromeda Galaxy has a couple of cool distinctions about it. For one, it is the closest galaxy to the Milky Way galaxy, other than the Magellanic Clouds, but the Magellanic Clouds are orbiting the Milky Way, so they're kind of like part of it in that way. And so, other than obviously the galaxies that are orbiting our own, this is actually the closest galaxy to our own galaxy. So it's our nearest neighbor, and it's about 2.5 million light years away, which means that this is an object 2.5 million light years from you, which means that when you look at it, the light that you're seeing was emitted 2.5 million years ago by those stars that make up this galaxy. Those stars, through nuclear fusion, made photons and sent them in every direction. And those photons have been traveling for 2.5 million years. And these particular photons happen to be headed in the right direction to go into the Earth's atmosphere and go and rain down upon the Earth. And some of those photons were at the right angle where they went down into your telescope and bounced off of your mirror and hit your other mirror, or went through your lenses, depending on the type of telescope you have, through the lens of your eye and died on your iris, right? At the end of their 2.5 million year journey, they get absorbed by the iris of your eye, and you see this object as it looked 2.5 million years ago. I think it's kind of incredible to think of the journey that just the light itself took to get to you. But that's one thing about it, right? It's 2.5 million light years away. Another thing about it is huge. Some estimates put it at double the size of the Milky Way. It is absolutely enormous. And the Milky Way itself, actually, as galaxies go, is pretty big. There are some monstrously huge elliptical galaxies, but as galaxies go, there are a lot of smaller galaxies in the Milky Way. It is a decently big galaxy. But the Andromeda Galaxy, oh man, it's just absolutely huge. But the really cool thing about the Andromeda Galaxy is if you get somewhere really dark, like our dark sky location that I was talking about before, the Andromeda Galaxy can be naked eye visible with the right conditions. And when I say the right conditions, I mean consistently at our dark sky location. Anytime I go to our observing site in the winter, if it's not a garbage night where we would pack up our scopes and go home, you can look up and go, oh, there it is. It looks like a little cigar-shaped smudge in the sky. It looks a little blurry. You point a telescope at it, you can actually see, and most of the time, through a telescope, just visually observing, you normally just see, a blurry thing. But with the Andromeda Galaxy, you can actually see the core and the outer bits. You can get a feel for the disk. You can even see dust lanes in it. I actually have observed it and saw a dust lane and indicated that in my sketch. I sketched the things that I observed. We could look at some sketches if you guys are interested. You can see these two things, M32 and M110. Those are actually two dwarf elliptical galaxies that are orbiting the Andromeda Galaxy in a similar way to how those Magellanic Clouds I mentioned before, which are dwarf irregular galaxies, orbit our own Milky Way. Man, I wish I hadn't run out of cough drops. Definitely gonna have to make a CVS run as soon as this show is over. So that is the Andromeda Galaxy, and yes, it's very much a winter object. Lisa says, yes, please talk about it. Refresh me, Lisa, which thing did I mention that you replied, yes, please talk about it? Unless it was this, unless I already talked about it, in which case, awesome. But if you want to remind me Because I did throw out several things like, hey, we can talk about this, we can talk about that. So remind me what it was if you remember. Sometimes if you guys are asking questions in the chat, I might, if I'm in the middle of talking about something, I might pin it and come back to it. But I do try to do that. And actually, come to think of it, Lisa also asked, what is a bar and how does it form? That's a really excellent question. I'll bring up a picture of an example of a barred spiral galaxy. In fact, there is a galaxy that's just called the Great Barred Spiral Galaxy. I think it's NGC. I'm brain farting on its number, but I'll just type Great Barred Spiral Galaxy. It's this guy right here. So, but also this galaxy is another good example. So, a lot of spiral galaxies have what's called a bar feature. So again, indicating the image credits here, Creative Commons Attribution 3.0. Whoever this is Gendler. This is their image. So thank you so much for making this available on the Commons. So this is that Great Barred Spiral Galaxy. I've had the pleasure of observing this one, and again, like I mentioned, most galaxies are in an amateur scope. It's a little blurry thing, and you're like, yep, I saw a smudge. This one, you can actually see these arms in this bar. It's awesome. But what a bar is basically all this stuff. No part of the galaxy is solid, right? Galaxies are like clouds of smoke. They're made up of bits of things. They're made up of gases, right? Which you can kind of see with these brown smears, what we call dust in astronomy, which just means gases that aren't glowing, basically, is what it means. And stars, right? And you see a lot of the stars here in the arms. And the bar feature itself is actually made of stars. Now, what's happening in this galaxy is it looks like these stars that form the bar just all line themselves up. And you would think, why? Why on earth would stars just line themselves up like that? But that's not actually what's happening. What's happening is if you pick out any individual star that's a member of this bar feature, remember that, or you may or may not know, that in the middle of the vast majority of galaxies, maybe all galaxies, I have to double check, are supermassive black holes, an incredibly dense object generating an absolute ton of gravitational attraction by its mass. And so there are stars that, rather than taking a nice circular or elliptical, all orbits are an ellipse, but very circularized ellipse orbit, which a lot of these the stars in the spiral arms actually do, and those orbits cause them to clump together and then spread out. It's interesting. They're not actually moving in this arm like you would think. It's kind of wild, but instead of having a nice, neat orbit like that, a lot of these individual stars have an orbit where they go out to here, and then they head in and whoop around that thing and back out again, right? So like a very stretched out ellipse with the black hole here, and the star comes wah, and then goes way back out again, and then comes in and just slings around. And these stars have an effect on each other gravitationally as well, right? So not only are they affected by the gravitational pull of that object in the center, they're affected by each other's gravitational pull and by the pull of the nearby stars that are orbiting like you would think. And so where these spiral arm features get close to the core, that's a lot of density, that's a lot of mass. And so if you had a star coming in this way and heading out, and then one coming in this way and one over here, those stretched out orbits get tugged on and affected by this gravitational pull and are regularized so that they all line up. And so so some of these stars are falling in, some are heading on their way back out, whatever, but these stretched out elliptical orbits all being kind of brought together in this way creates this bar feature across the center of the galaxy. Not all spirals have them. A good example of a galaxy that doesn't have a bar feature is Messier 83. All right, Messier. No. Actually, 83 has a pretty strong bar feature. Now that I'm looking at it here, it's Let's try Pinwheel Galaxy. Let's try Messier 33. There's the southern pinwheel and the pinwheel, and I went with the wrong pinwheel. All right. So this is Messier 33. Here is the attribution Alexander Melig under Share Alike 3.0 Creative Commons. And this, oh wow, look at this. So this image, this was taken with the 10-inch Newtonian. I have a 10-inch Newtonian, but I don't have all this, which is how he got this incredible image. All right, so if you look here, first of all, the spiral arms in 33 are a little weaker than in a lot of other galaxies, but you'll also notice there's no bar, right? So it's still a matter of research as to why some spiral galaxies have bars and others don't, why some have a stronger bar feature, exactly how the bar forms. I gave sort of the layman's understanding, but the more detailed understanding of exactly how these bar features form is still an area of active research. It's a very cool question. And with that, I'm going to head back to the chat real fast. Neva's Dark Sky site that I mentioned, is that the swamp? Yeah, it's the swamp. So we call it the swamp. It's not really a swamp. It's actually just a clearing in the middle of the woods with an artificial pond, man-made pond. It's a very small pond. And its purpose is to dip the bucket, right? If they're going to put out a forest fire, let the helicopter come and dip the bucket and then dump the water. So there are a bunch of these little artificial ponds dispersed more or less evenly throughout the Osceola State Forest for that purpose. And so this one has a nice clearing around it, and so it's a good location. It's in a nice dark spot, so we use it. I always say that if the Forestry Service ever needs it, we won't be there because forest fires are notoriously terrible observing conditions. I've been cracking that joke for a long time. One time I did invite some people to the swamp and then had to cancel because they were doing a controlled burn. And so it really was actually not the time to be at the swamp. Jeff says he's been out to the St. John's Fairgrounds many times for astrophotography, but would definitely like something darker. Yeah, Jeff, I will tell you it is darker. 100%. A lot of the people who are in, and he mentions the fairgrounds. I should mention at the beginning when I was talking about Nephis, I forgot to shout out the other astronomy club. If you live in the St. Augustine area, definitely check out the Ancient City Astronomy Club. They're another great astronomy group. Really cool group of guys. A lot of us are members of both. I'm a member of both. I think I might be past due on my dues. I'll have to double check, but for a while I was a member of both. And there's a very strong friendship between our two clubs. They often come out and join us at the swamp. We often come out and join them at the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds are good because they're very accessible. They're paved, right? They're not a mosquito-infested no man's land. So they're really good. Somewhere between a terrible site, but that's good for outreach, and a truly dark site. But the swamp location is a truly dark location. So yeah, Jeff, when I'm talking about our dark sky area, I am talking about the swamp. Here on the YouTube channel, I have a tendency to not say swamp because I want to avoid confusion in case people in the audience are like, the heck is he talking about the swamp? But you are right. If you meet us in person, we're always like, yeah, you going to the swamp? I'm just going to the swamp, whatever. Actually, the real reason, so I always thought it was called the swamp just because it's got a pond out there in the middle of the woods and we live in Florida, and there's an alligator. But the real reason it's called the swamp actually is an interesting historical aspect. Our club, Nephis, used to be called the Astro Gators. And so, Gators, it's the swamp. That's kind of, they named it the swamp. All right, let's see here. Still kind of the same stuff in the chat. So while I'm talking again, by all means, feel free to dump any questions in there. You're not going to interrupt me if I'm talking because you just throw a question in. I glance the chat every so often. I'll see it. So this is a good time to pause and remind everybody that this is a live show, obviously. And there's no such thing as a stupid or dumb question. I do not believe in it. In fact, I think my last stream, I want to say, the theme of it was the dumb questions episode, where I talked about questions people have asked me with the preface, this may be a dumb question, but that actually turned out to be very interesting questions with very interesting answers. And we kind of dove into a lot of really cool topics. So while I wait for some more questions to appear in the chat, I will kind of rewind and do what I normally do at the start of the session, but I wanted to jump as I really didn't want to lose the momentum. I love it. We're getting started right off the gate, which is that I'm going to go ahead and talk about what's in the sky tonight. Do a quick little planetarium constellation tour of what you can see. What Bortle is the swamp? Fairgrounds is like a Bortle 4. Yeah, the swamp is like a 3. It's if you don't know the Bortle scale, it's kind of like earring gauges, right? The lower the number, the better, essentially. And so Bortle 1 is like the middle of the Sahara Desert or the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But the swamp, I believe, qualifies as a Bortle 3. It may even be like a 2.5. It's honestly a decent sight. On a good night, it can get real dark. Like I said, like seeing the gaps in the Milky Way, Andromeda Galaxy is a naked eye object, even on a bad swamp night, kind of dark. It is next level, man, and you will see so many stars. First time I went to the swamp, I couldn't find anything because I did not know how to find my constellations among so many stars. Uh, Playing Portal 3 this entire time. I'm not sure. So let's. I'm not sure if that's a reference to something I put on screen. If it is, fill me in on the joke. But otherwise, I do want to say let's try to keep the conversation astronomical, just so that that's what the chats are about. That's what the show's about. But like no lies detected. Portal 1 and Portal 2 are legit games, and if there's a Portal 3, man, tell me after the show because I want to know. All right, so because I said Bortle 3. Right, Bortle with a B. I get you now. It was a joke. Cool. Bortle, the Bortle scale. Think like Blake Bortle. Bortles! Right, the Bortle scale. All right, so anyone watch The Good Place? Oh, my God, if you haven't, you should check it out. I'm curious to see how many. We got about 7 or so people watching concurrently, according to the metrics. That's cool. So we're just going to keep on rolling. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick What's in the Sky Tonight Sky Tour. And while I give the tour, I might throw out some things that are interesting that y'all might want to ask me about. Or if you think of anything you want to ask me about, by all means. And also, don't feel constrained by the concept of a question, right? If you don't have a specific question, you can also just put a topic in the chat, something you're interested in talking about without there being a specific question. So I love when this show is about you guys and what you are interested in, right? And I love it when I look in and realize it's 9:30 and we've just hung out and talked about space all night. What could be better, right? Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and change the date on here to tonight, and we're going to go to put it on real time. Oh, right. The sun hasn't actually set yet. In real time. So we're going to, there we go. So we're going to go to just after sundown. All right. So first of all, as always, the circumpolars are always going to be available. So we can start there and talk about the circumpolars. What do I mean by circumpolar? So circumpolar is this little group of constellations right here. Circum meaning around and polar meaning around the pole, because this is the pole star right here. So if I play with the time a little bit, you'll see how they kind of just rotate right around the pole star. That's why we call those the circumpolar constellations, right? So if you look to the north tonight, one of the easiest constellations to find, I'll take the stars away or the lines away, and it might even make it easier for you to spot. You probably already noticed it, and that is the Big Dipper right here, right? Big Dipper will be really easy to find in the night sky. Get out, look north, find the 7 brightest stars in that direction, and you got it. All right. Right now the dipper's turned over, like we're maybe dumping out the water or the milk or whatever. But this is it. This what have we got going on here, man? Gaia. Oh, okay, cool. That's a star. All right, so let me get some water, man. Okay. So, these incredibly bright stars form what we call the Big Dipper. Now, this may come as a surprise. The Big Dipper, technically, is not actually a constellation. Not officially. It is, see, now I got the scratchy, tickly throat. So we're going to be stuck with the coughing for the next forever. It's too late now. So, the Big Dipper is... it's not an official constellation. So officially there are 88 officially recognized constellations that are part of the International Astronomical Union thing. Uh, any other star pattern is called an asterism. And actually, even constellations have what's called the primary asterism. Asterism is the term for a shape made out of stars. Constellations, as defined, are really what they are is they're regions of space, right? I don't think I can actually put, which is unfortunately, I don't think I can put the borders, but every constellation actually has borders around it. And that is the defining characteristic. That's why there are 88 of them, and every object in the sky is given, like, it is in this constellation. But anyway, the Big Dipper is an asterism that is part of a larger constellation called Ursa Major, the Big Bear. So if I add the lines, here we can see the body of the bear. The head is up here. The front leg and front paw is these two stars. It forms the paw. The hind leg and these two stars forms the rear paw. And of course, picture it sort of like, the paws are together, right? So it's just, you're like, oh no, he's got two legs. No, there's a pair, right? Some people actually will connect these stars to it and draw another leg back here. There's not, for a lot of these constellations, there's more than one correct way to draw the lines. And then of course you have the tail coming out this way, right? Now, if we take the edge of the bowl of the Big Dipper, oh yeah, and here we go. So there's the artwork, Ursa Major, the Big Bear. If we take Merak and Dubhe, which form the edge of the bowl, and we look at the open part of the bowl, right, not the bottom part, obviously, and we draw the line through it and just keep going, we eventually hit this star right here, which is called Polaris. Now, there's a very common misconception that Polaris, aka the North Star, is the brightest star. It is not. If you are lost and you follow the brightest star, you are even more lost. The North Star is actually the 43rd brightest star, so barely in the top 50, but it's always north. As you saw earlier when I was doing the time travel, so everything kind of went around, but this star stayed stationary. Now, the truth is the pole star is actually slightly off-center from the pole and draws a tiny little circle throughout the night, but is more or less, as far as your naked eye can tell, basically stationary. Once you found Polaris, you can jump over and usually find Kochab and Ferkad over here that form the edge of the bowl. Unfortunately, as you can see by the size of the dots, most of the stars in the Little Dipper are very faint. Little Dipper is actually a difficult constellation to see. Not only that, but it's actually fairly big. The Little Dipper is about the size of your hand outstretched. It's just the Little Dipper because if you compare it, it's littler than the Big Dipper. There's another object that is often pointed out to me when people say, like, is that the Little Dipper? And I'll point it out during the Sky Tour. Spoiler alert, it is not. This is actually the Little Dipper. But again, Little Dipper isn't the official name of this constellation. This is Ursa Minor, the Little Bear. Now, one thing I always point out when I do my live talks is that our bears have long tails. And the story goes that they were whipped around by the tail like this and slung into the sky, and that stretched out their tails, and that's why they have long tails. In addition to these two, there are some other circumpolar constellations that are a little bit faint, a little bit more tricky to find. I leave that as an exercise to the viewer as you start to expand your constellation knowledge. But they include things like Draco and Camelopardalis, which is a really fun word to say. What is a camelopardalis? Well, a camelopard is what they used to call giraffes in the Middle Ages. So camelopardalis is actually a giraffe. Oh, here's the border. See how it draws the border on it if I click the name? So constellations are actually officially that border. And then Cassiopeia down here. As you can see, Cassiopeia is now setting. And, of course, the Andromeda Galaxy is already gone. So it's already too late in the year to see the Andromeda Galaxy to, again, touch on that question from earlier. Cepheus is another circumpolar, but really learning the two Dippers and Cassiopeia, those are the main circumpolars to get you started. Now, one thing we have, if we go to the western sky, you'll see that Orion is very low in his setting. Taurus has already set. Perseus and Cassiopeia are also about to set. Those are all things associated mostly with winter time, right? Which means that if I'm talking about what's in the sky tonight, we're not going to be talking about the Perseus constellations. What we can talk about, though, is that Orion is still there. There's the famous belt. As you can see, again, lots of big dots, lots of bright stars. And Sirius, which is going to start to leave us as we move into the summer, is a really big dot because this is actually the brightest star in the sky, which means that depending on the year, the time of year, depending on when it is, it'll be the brightest star in the sky that night, or it'll be somewhere else, and some other star will be the brightest. But if you're following the brightest star, you're going to be heading west or east, right? You're not going to be heading north. What is in the sky tonight, though, that we can definitely talk about is Gemini. So we've got these two bright stars here, Pollux and Castor, and those form the constellation Gemini. In Gemini right now is Mars, the planet Mars, and I'm sure you guys in the audience all know what it means when Mars is in Gemini, don't you? It means that it has an orbit. So it means that Mars is a planet. So, but anyway, so it is in Gemini. So if you find Castor and Pollux, and then you kind of start to look down towards the horizon from those, that reddish star there, not actually a star, it's Mars. Maybe point a telescope or binoculars at it. Nearby is Cancer. Cancer is a very faint constellation. If I remove the lines, you'd never find it. It is very faint. Well, cool thing about Cancer, though, is if you get somewhere dark enough, you'll see a blurry thing in the middle. That is actually an open star cluster called the Beehive Cluster, and it's a very bright, rich, big open star cluster. Very cool object to look at. So big that it actually is difficult to fit the whole thing in the view if you're using a telescope. It's actually a better binocular target. It's similar to something that we don't have right now because we lost it already, which is a winter object called the Pleiades. This is the object that people will often point to me and say, is that the Little Dipper? And I say, no, that's the microscopic Dipper. It would be very tiny indeed if that were the Big Dipper. But it's not in the sky right now. Moving on from there, here you'll see this star Regulus, and you'll be able to find this upside down or this backwards question mark shape right here. Well, what this backwards question mark shape, we often call that the sickle in astronomy, but again, that is an asterism, not an official name. Checking the chat, still no questions. Cool, that's all right. So what the sickle actually is it's the mane of the lion. That is the mane of Leo. If we draw in the lines, we've got the body and the tail. I always imagine Leo lying down like the MGM lion with his front legs out here and his hind leg kind of tucked up. Most artists draw him like he's running or walking. I guess it's a matter of interpretation. Because there's not a whole lot of stars to give us an indication of legs, I just always pictured him, perched and regal. But that's just kind of how I interpret the constellation. Leo is actually a really cool constellation for a few reasons. For one, you'll see this star right here, Chertan, and then this one down here, Iota Leonis. About halfway between the two of them, if you point a telescope about halfway between the two and a little bit off center, is something we call the Leo triplet, which is three galaxies. These are fairly bright, so they're good amateur targets. This third one over here is a little fainter than the other two, so sometimes you'll see two, and this third one will be a bit of a struggle. This is a really cool object. See three galaxies at the same time? Can't lose, man. Great object called the Leo cluster. But if you're looking, look, there's another galaxy right there. If we move into the tail and I start to zoom in a little bit, the software's going to start to point out some other galaxies. There's one, here's one, there's several galaxies, right? So Leo is one of the best constellations. And I say one of because I'm about to top it, but Leo is one of the best constellations for galaxy hunting, right? If we go up here, we have another set of bright galaxies, and somewhere around here there's a second triplet, actually. Here it is. Let me try to find here's the third component. So these three galaxies here, and actually there's a fourth component that's just a little fainter, but these three right here form a particularly bright grouping as well. And some people call that the Leo triplet part 2, right? Or the second triplet, or the belly triplet, because it's kind of under Leo's belly. So Leo is absolutely incredible. But the reason why I say Leo isn't the best is because we also have Coma Berenices. And if I zoom into Coma Berenices, it is also, there's a galaxy, galaxy. The Coma Berenices is, again, similarly just absolutely jam-packed full of galaxies. There's one, right? But the real ticket is Virgo. So here's a little trick, by the way, to help you find Leo and Virgo. So if we go to Ursa Major and we find the tail of the Dipper, see how the tail has a curve to it, a bend? We can call that bend an arc, and we can arc to Arcturus, this red bright star here. That's a part of a constellation called Boötes the Herdsman. But once you've arced to Arcturus, you can then spike onto Spica, right? So you just keep it going, and you hit Spica. And Spica is the brightest star in Virgo. And then from Virgo, that's another way to find Leo, right? You're kind of coming at it from the tail end. Another way to find Leo is if we imagine that the Dipper has a hole poked in the bottom, the liquid in the Dipper would drip right onto Leo's back. Right? So if you find the Big Dipper, imagine drilling a hole in the bottom, and then the milk or the water or whatever you got in your Dipper drips onto the back of the lion. And so that's another way to find Leo. And then, of course, we can also find it by knowing that if we go from Gemini, we can go over to Leo by heading to the east. Those are all, but that one's, I guess, a bit of a more advanced technique of if you really know the sky. But all those are good tricks. And then once you find Virgo and you find Leo, now you have, here's the tip of Leo's tail, here's Virgo, and you have this area in between. Now, this zone is what we call the Virgo cluster, right? So galaxies form into clusters. Clusters form into superclusters. And the Virgo supercluster is the supercluster of galaxies to which our galaxy belongs. We're not a member of a particularly dense cluster in itself. We have what's called the local group. That's us, the Pinwheel Galaxy, Andromeda Galaxy, a couple others form the local group. The Virgo cluster is very rich and is actually the heart of the Virgo supercluster, and the local group is out near the edge. So when we look in this direction, it happens to be that we're looking towards the densest part of the supercluster of galaxies to which we belong. So if I zoom in, we're going to start to hit, and the software is kind of holding out on me, but we're going to start to hit galaxy, 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 boom, 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 over here, here. And then we have something called Markarian's chain. Just about this right here, you can fit that in the view of your telescope, right? That's reasonable to accomplish. I've done it. And here we have just boom, 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 boom. So many. And if you zoom in, the software starts to indicate more, right? And there's like more in the background here that you would need to photograph to pick those up. But there's just an absolutely, look at all of these. Look, here, 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 here. It's an absolutely outrageous number of galaxies in this piece of sky, which is why amateur astronomers like to call this time of year galaxy season. So if anyone has a question about the Virgo cluster, let's see here. Jeff says Markarian's chain is a part of that cluster, right? It's something I'm hoping to photograph. Yeah, again, I guess I was kind of headed where you were headed with that one, right? Markarian's chain, yeah, it is incredible. One of my favorite sketches I have is my sketch of Markarian's chain. I just sketched every blurry thing I saw. I counted it later. I had observed 11 galaxies in one view. Markarian's chain. Now, it is, a lot of those galaxies are a bit faint by the standards of things like, most galaxies are faint. The Andromeda Galaxy is unique. There are a handful of really bright galaxies, but most are kind of faint and are impossible under light polluted skies. And Markarian's chain is a good example. Jeff wants to know, what's a good focal length for Markarian's chain? So that's a really good photography question, and I got to be honest, I know nothing about photography. I will always admit that. I actually go really old school and I sketch everything I observe, and I just do visual, eye to the eyepiece. But we do have, Jeff, if you hop on the NEFAS Facebook page, we've got a lot of photographers in the NEFAS Facebook page, and they would be really good at giving you some tips on focal length. because I'm not really sure how focal length impacts astrophotography, but I know that it does. So that is a really good question that unfortunately I can't answer. Everyone else being real quiet in the chat. Every time people are just sitting there real quiet, I don't know if you're bored or if you are just really enjoying and you're just like, I'm just going to let them keep talking because this is all fascinating. Or if you just can't think of a question to ask. From my side, I'm sitting here trying to think of things to talk about, and I kind of wish you would post more questions. But by all means, I'm just going to finish up talking about the sky. But hopefully, by the time I'm done talking, y'all will have posted some more questions we can talk about. If not, I can always pull something out of thin air. But I like to have things to talk about. Nearby to Virgo is a constellation called Corvus. That one, again, not a super easy one to find, though. I'm just going to give the tour of the sky and point out kind of the major ones and some of the cool things to look at. So Virgo cluster, if you got a telescope and you can get somewhere dark, man, do it. Mars, of course, is in the sky tonight. What else can I talk about? Hercules. Okay, let's go to the eastern sky, right? I kind of work my way east. So we do have Boötes. There's not a lot going on in Boötes object-wise. I will come back to Ursa Major, actually. Since we're on the topic of galaxies, Ursa Major has its own galaxy group. It's called the Ursa Major Group. So there are several galaxies around Ursa Major as well. It's also a decent galaxy constellation, which is cool because being circumpolar, it's more or less available year-round. But I want to draw attention to a couple of galaxies in Ursa Major specifically. One of them, here it is off the tail of Ursa Major, right? So if we look at, you get the idea how it is. So if you take Megrez and Alkaid, and you imagine if you were to draw a line to form a right angle to join those two, like you wanted to form a right triangle and ignore these two stars, right about where you would plop that right angle, right, maybe a little bit off of where you would plop that right angle, is Messier 51. And Messier 51 is very cool for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to pull it up here in the... let me turn it on. Pull it up here in the visuals to show you what I mean. Goodness gracious. I think I might actually just need to change my allergy meds. That could be it. Good night. Whew, it did clear things up a little bit, though. All right. So this is NASA and European Space Agency public domain. So my guess, I think this was taken by the Hubble, this image. It has a Hubble look to it. It looks like, I feel like this is a Hubble image. If you looked at enough Hubble images, you kind of know what they look like. So, and there's a huge file. We're going to sit and let this load for a second. While this loads, some things you probably are already starting to notice about the picture. Obviously, a lot of blue, right? A lot of stars, a lot of pink as well, and a lot of brown. I did a whole episode on colors. It's one of my favorite episodes I've done. Highly encourage you to go through my backlog and check it out if you've got another 2 hours to hang out, to sit and listen to me talk about space. But it, man, earlier when I was looking for an example of a galaxy with no bar, the Whirlpool has no bar. I should have just gone with this one. But anyway, so I did a whole episode on color and the significance of color, and we can talk about that a little bit tonight as well if you like. Again, anything you guys want to talk about, we'll talk about. So this is the Whirlpool Galaxy, and it is a spiral galaxy, and it is a very good example of a spiral galaxy. Big, beautiful spiral arms. One thing I find interesting about M51, also called the Whirlpool Galaxy, is how angular it is. Like, you would think that the spiral arms would all form a sort of neat curve, but oftentimes galaxies will interact with other galaxies, will pass kind of close, things will get gravitationally disturbed, there's a lot of chaotic things impacting a galaxy, and so they'll distort a little bit, and it's wild to me how many spiral galaxies you'll find straight lines and angles in the arms. So if you look, this arm kind of comes out looking curved, but it's kind of straight-ish here, and it bends right here. There's a little bend right there, right? A hard angle there. This right here, look at this angle. Oh, man, right? And then over here, it just sort of comes up and then just almost heads like it's just up and over, right? So that's one thing I find very cool about this. Through an amateur telescope, you usually can't see the spiral arms. I have on a very clear night, like had one of those zen moments of just everything clicked perfectly sky condition wise, and my eyes were adjusted well, and everything was just dialed in. I was just having a good night, and I could see the spiral arms in this galaxy from our swamp location. It was incredible. But most of the time you don't see that. What you usually see through an amateur scope, though, is you'll see this bright area, and you'll see a second bright area to the right. What is this over here? Well, what this is all that remains of an elliptical galaxy that passed too close to the Whirlpool galaxy. Actually, I want to say it passed through it. It has headed out. It has distorted the Whirlpool, and the Whirlpool has distorted it. And is pulling material. You see how some of this material is actually kind of getting stretched out into the Whirlpool. What you're basically seeing is one galaxy eating another. Because, believe it or not, galaxy collisions and interactions are actually incredibly common. Let's see here. MSP says enjoying the info. Jeff is definitely interested in the color info. Cool. So we'll take a second. We'll talk about the color aspect as well. I was kind of done with the sky tour of what's in the sky tonight anyway. It's kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about. So we can definitely jump on that. Let's see here. Yeah, so that's what's happening here. Galaxy collisions and interactions and mergers are actually very common. So let's talk about the color. So color can actually tell us a lot about a galaxy, right? What color it is. And once I get done explaining what I'm going to explain, you will not look at pictures of galaxies the same way again. Bear in mind that what I'm about to say is only true for true color images in the visible spectrum, right? James Webb actually images things in infrared. There are also X-ray images of galaxies that you'll sometimes see. This would not be applicable to that. But it is applicable to any true color visible spectrum image of a galaxy. So, first let's talk about blue. What does blue tell us? Well, right out of the gate, you'll probably have noticed that the blue is concentrated in the stars, right? There aren't big smears of blue in this galaxy. It's speckled, right? It's glittery. So you'll see a lot of blue color in the stars and in the spiral arms of the galaxy. And basically, stars get their color from how hot they are, right? So hotter stars burn brighter and bluer, and cooler stars are dimmer and redder. And the temperature of the star is determined by its mass, right? The more material there is, the more the star's weight is crushing it to heat it up to cause that fusion reaction. So bigger stars burn hotter than smaller stars. But if you imagine the difference between like an SUV and a Prius, right, or like a Hummer, like a Humvee and a Prius, a Humvee, I'm pretty sure, has a bigger gas tank than a Prius. But it has to stop more often for gas. And the reason is because it doesn't use that fuel as efficiently, right? It's burning that fuel quickly. Prius, super fuel efficient. So a smaller fuel tank, but it has to fill up less often because it makes that fuel last. That's how stars are. The bigger stars, yes, have more fuel. They are bigger, and a star is made out of its own fuel. They're made of hydrogen. But they burn through that fuel quickly. So very big stars don't last very long. They burn out and they explode, right? So what that means is, for a galaxy to have a large population of blue stars, that indicates to us that either this galaxy is fairly young, and so not enough time has passed for those blue stars to die, because they'll tend, basically what happens to a galaxy is the blue stars all die out, and then the redder and yellower stars are left and give the galaxy an amber color, right? So younger galaxies, we would expect to find more blue stars, because blue stars don't last as long as the others, so the galaxy would have to be young for them to still be there. But it also can be an indication that the galaxy is forming new stars. It still has active new star formation going on, and so it's replenishing that population of big blue hot stars in addition to other star types as well. And while that's going on, those blue stars are going to outshine the others and give the galaxy a blue tint, right? So when we see blue in a galaxy, that tells us young and active star formation. This galaxy is still forming new stars. And that is also part of an indication that the galaxy is young. Because as the galaxies go through their life, they use up the gas that is in them, which is the material that makes stars, right? So when that gaseous material is used up, the galaxy kind of like runs out of available star-making material. It gets to be where it's kind of low in that stuff. There's not a whole lot of it there, and it's sort of like thin and spread out and not likely to form stars. All the blue guys die off, and the galaxy turns amber colored. So that's one thing that we can learn from the color of the galaxy. And I can show you an example of an old, developed amber galaxy. I'm getting a text real fast. Let me see what it's about, if it's anything to do with tonight's thing. No. Okay, cool. I always check, because some people will actually text me their question if they're having trouble participating in the group chat. So that's what the blue tells us. Now, the other thing you might have noticed here is the pink. All this hot pink. And you might think maybe these are the red stars I was talking about, but they're actually not. What this is these are clumps of hydrogen gas. But there's actually hydrogen gas throughout this galaxy. The reason why this hydrogen is pink is because it's been ionized, right? So it's been exposed to high doses of radiation that excite the electrons on the hydrogen atoms and cause it to radiate this reddish pink light, right? That's what hydrogen does when excited and ionized. Why is the hydrogen ionized? Well, it's ionized because the hydrogen gas in these regions is dense, and clumps have formed within that gas, and those clumps have actually compressed enough and gathered enough mass to heat up and become stars. And those stars' radiation ionizes the gas and makes it glow. So what you're seeing with all the pink is those are actually the places where the star formation is happening, right? So pink in a galaxy indicates what we call H2 regions. Now, H2 is molecular hydrogen, right? It's hydrogen. But also H Roman numeral 2 is doubly ionized hydrogen in astronomical lingo. In chemistry, you would write H++, but in astronomy, we use Roman numerals for some dumb reason. It makes it very confusing, but that's what these are. So we call them H2 regions, also called molecular clouds, because this is hydrogen in its molecular state, meaning it's bonded together into molecules. And the other name, this is a type of nebula, right? Nebula is just a general term for clouds of gas. And so these are star-forming regions. So with that, I can actually show you another picture real fast. So if we go to Lagoon, too many O's there, Lagoon Nebula. Now with nebulae, you really have to be careful. Most images of nebulae are false color images. And that's because false color images actually do a better job of showing you the composition of the nebula. They're more scientifically useful. And so Hubble and telescopes like that will often color code different wavelengths of light to exaggerate their differences so that it's easier to easily visually say, like, oh, I see there's a lot of hydrogen, but there's also some oxygen and some nitrogen and these kinds of things. But a true color image of your typical H2 region is going to be pink, right? So here is the Lagoon Nebula, nice and pink. Here you see a little cluster of stars. These stars formed out of this gas and are illuminating it. Here you can see some knobs in here too, some dense region. Here, right here, you see, let me zoom in. Good night. Okay, that really zoomed in, but you can see how there's like regions where it's a little bit more dense, right? Little clumps forming in here. Those are the places where stars are being formed in this gas cloud. And that's what that pink is. That pink is regions of active star formation. All right. So let's take a look at... Oh, and let me give you guys the attribution real fast. ESO, Gizzard, Creative Commons 4.0 for this one. Let me check the chat real fast. Okay, still interested in color. All right, cool. So, and let me, one quick second here. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so let's get back to what we were talking about. Right, I was going to show you an example of a galaxy with different colors, right? So let's go to Messier 87. You'll get a lot of pictures of black holes if you search Messier 87, because famously the very first ever image black hole was in that galaxy. But here's an image of the galaxy itself. Now, right out of the gate, we can see this is very different. Oh, hold on a second. This is another NASA Hubble image in the public domain. So, right out of the gate, we can see that this galaxy, you know what, this is not a great example because they didn't frame it well, and they're mostly trying to capture this jet, which is another really cool thing we can talk about. Let me just type elliptical. Here's a good example. This one is Able S740. Not really that familiar with that one, but this is another NASA and Hubble public domain image. Very cool. Getting all the public domain stuff. Okay, so this one right here, this is, as you can tell right out of the gate, quite different from the other galaxy we were looking at, some of those other ones we were looking at. So first of all, this is what we call an elliptical galaxy. So spiral galaxies are, of course, spiral-shaped. Elliptical galaxies are not. They're basically a big blob, big, mostly spherical or ellipsoid grouping of stars. And then there's a third category we call irregular, where they're just sort of weird shapes. Irregulars tend to be kind of smaller galaxies. Bigger ones sort of regularize over time. But other irregular galaxies are often the result of interactions, right? One galaxy hits another, they pass through, whatever, they get distorted into a weird shape, and so you get an irregular galaxy. One thing you'll notice right out of the gate here, no blue and no pink. So based on what we were saying before, what does that tell us about this galaxy? It's no longer making new stars, and it's probably old, right? An older galaxy. Now, the the smaller, redder stars, and by the way, I mentioned earlier red stars are dying. There's two different kinds of red stars. A red giant, which is a star that swelled up and turned red because it's dying, and looks like there's something on my wall there, like a little bug or something. And then there are what are called red dwarfs, which are just really small stars that just aren't hot enough to be any color other than red. Those stars last a long time. I mean, all the other stars will long since be gone by the time the red dwarfs finally run out of fuel. It's honestly kind of mind-boggling how much longer their lifespan is versus every other kind of star. So a very developed galaxy like this one will tend to have a more reddish, yellowish, amber color like this. And this gets into an interesting bit of the theory about the formation of galaxies. And there's still a lot of active debate. This is still an area of active research. There's not a lot that's definitive in terms of galaxy formation, but a lot of the spiral galaxies tend to be blue and have lots of pink in them. So they seem to have a lot of star formation going on. They tend to be young. And then a lot of the elliptical galaxies, first of all, some of them are absolutely huge. Like the biggest galaxies in our observable universe, all ellipticals, right? For the most part. Just absolutely many of the absolutely hugest galaxies are elliptical galaxies, and they don't show signs of star formation, right? They look old. And so there's a hypothesis, there's one model basically that says that this may represent a real progression, a natural progression of galaxies, a tendency to go from spiral galaxies, right? Use up all the material, make all the stars, and then the spiral structure maybe the spiral structure is not very stable. It doesn't actually stick around in the long run, or that the longer a galaxy has been around, the more opportunity it has had to interact with other galaxies that may disturb that spiral shape and cause them to eventually end up, coalescing into a blob shape instead, right? Which is a nice ordered structure, but much simpler than the spiral. And so, because a lot of these ellipticals are so big, there's a thought that this may actually be the result of merging. So you get two smaller galaxies, they merge together, other galaxies merge in with them, swirl around, and in the merger itself, you get a flurry of star formation because the gases from those galaxies end up smooshing as they merge. And so tons of star formation happens during the merger, gas gets used up, and it coalesces into a ball shape, and then the blue guys all die off, and you're left with this. That's one model for how this could happen. There are other models as well. I'm not super versed on all of it. I do find it to be a very fascinating topic, and it's one that I'm always excited about learning more about because it's one of those places where I can identify there's something I don't know, right? And sometimes in astronomy, it's like, I don't know. Oh, no one knows. That's kind of neat, right? Now I really want to know, right? So, yeah. So that's a little bit about color in galaxies and the difference between this and some other ones. But there are some spiral galaxies. I'm just going to type spiral galaxy and see if any of them come up. There are some spiral galaxies that are not blue though. You will occasionally see like amber color, or what you often see is like kind of pale, ghostly white spiral galaxies. And I am having trouble finding even one right now. You know what I should search for? Lenticular galaxy. There's another thing called a lenticular galaxy. Right, and we're getting a lot of lenticular clouds. I forgot the word galaxy. That's why. Lenticular clouds are cool too, though, man. So you'll get stuff like this guy, right? What is this? Is this halfway between a spiral and an elliptical galaxy? How about this one, right? Again, Hubble image here. Getting a lot of cool Hubble images. That's useful. And then, here, this chart right here, Astro Whoever, public domain chart, we see how the axis ratio, percentage of... What are they trying to demonstrate? I thought this was going to show, like, the trend that suggests an evolutionary path from one type of galaxy to the other, but that doesn't... I'm not entirely sure anymore that that's what's being depicted here. This one's kind of neat looking. Look at this guy, man. A lot of them are, like, ghostly almost. They're kind of cool looking. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything I had to say about galaxies, unless there's a more specific question from somebody in the audience. I'm going to give you guys a second to let me know. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about tonight? Any other topic that you're interested in? Got awesome info. Thanks. Awesome. Cool. Glad you appreciate it. We're going to drop Wikimedia real fast. Yeah, just give you guys a second to think of anything else that you might be interested in. Basically, we have a little over a half hour left in the presentation. In the live stream. Late, what did I miss? First of all, hey, what's up? That's my dad right there. Charlie Mike is my dad. What do you think in the next 10 years we will see many more small space stations in orbit? That's a good question. I don't know about if we'll see many, because because there was like the International Space Station, right? And then that is being decommissioned. I don't know how much longer it has. China has its own space station, and I think that's kind of it right now for space stations in orbit. But with the private sector getting into space exploration more and more, it would not surprise me at all if you get like different private companies, each want to put up their own station, or maybe they want to build a economic station, like a big sky mall, literal sky mall. Um, Guest speaker at the meeting was talking about their company making. Yes, we had a guest speaker at our last Nevis meeting that I couldn't make it to. I had something else going on, but he talked about their company made 3D printers that got sent up to the ISS, so that now during resupply, I guess they give them more plastic, and the ISS can 3D print components, right? Which is really useful, right? Because they're up there, they can print their own components. Jeff says, looking forward to the next stream. Off for the night. Great stuff as usual. Awesome. Thanks for being here, Jeff. And then my dad said, what did I miss? Well, mainly we just talked about galaxies tonight. Honestly, tonight kind of became a galaxy night. We talked about we talked a little bit about like what's the best time of year to view the Milky Way. We talked a little bit about the Andromeda Galaxy, and then kind of got into talking about the significance of color in a galaxy image, right? The blue, which indicates young stars and a young galaxy. The pink, which are the areas of active star formation, that kind of stuff. So mainly that's kind of a little bit about galaxy structure and evolution tonight. Fiber optic cables are 10 to 100 times faster when made in space. Faster, like in terms of data transmit speed. Sounds good. Start over. Yeah, right. Let's just go back. Let's do it again. All right. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit longer to see if there's anything else you guys are really interested in talking about. As you hear in my voice, and as I've mentioned a couple times, I'm getting over something and my voice is worn out. So I may just call it early if there's nothing else that people are really interested in discussing. But don't let that make you think you can't drop a question. If you drop a question, knowing me, I'll get excited about it and we'll just start running. We'll just start going. I guess one thing this is how we do this too. I guess I could talk about. So one thing I could talk about is I did mention the star formation regions, right? The pink in the galaxies that we were mentioning. So you your mind might already have gone to this, but if you have a cloud of gas and then that gas forms a bunch of clumps, and those clumps all form a bunch of stars, you would think that eventually what you get is where you had a clump of gas, you now have a clump of stars. And that's true. And what that is what we call an open star cluster. So the winter time is a really good time to view open star clusters, but we still have a couple of them in the sky tonight if you wanted to look. M35 is a good example. Messier 37, 36, and 38 are all good examples. I mentioned up here in Cancer, the Beehive, also called Praesepe, another good example of an open star cluster that's cool to observe. And the Pleiades as well. What does happen eventually is the stars in a cluster will drift apart over time, right? And they'll get further from each other. And the sun actually formed in this way. It since has drifted away. It is no longer part of a star cluster. But if we were to rewind the clock about 4 billion years, there would be a lot of really bright stars in the sky when our sun was actually part of a star cluster. And now this is one of those cases where it led me to ask a question, which is, if that's the case, are there any stars that we know of that were for sure a member of that same star cluster? And I want to say it's this one. Is it this one? One of these ones in near like the bend of one of Hercules' arms is a true, and I think it's this one actually, is a true solar sibling. Based on its chemical composition and the path it's currently taking through the Milky Way galaxy, it's been determined that it formed in the same star cluster that our sun formed, and has since drifted away from it because it's made of the same chemical composition. So, and you might think, well, isn't the chemical composition of a star really easy? It's hydrogen, right? But not actually. Mostly, yes, but stars that form nowadays form out of gas clouds that have been seeded with elements from large stars that turned hydrogen into a bunch of other stuff, then blew up, and then new stars formed out of that That's why the Earth isn't just made of hydrogen. We've got all the other elements. We've got the carbon. We got nitrogen, oxygen. Right? These are all made in stars, and so different nebulae will have very slight differences in the concentrations of these non-hydrogen elements. Right? The gas is mostly hydrogen, and it's got trace amounts of a bunch of other stuff. And the exact composition and proportions of those trace amounts is like a fingerprint for that molecular cloud and for stars that form from it. So we can analyze the light coming off of distant stars to get the spectrum. We can break the light up into a spectrum and look for lines, basically missing colors in that spectrum that correlate to different chemical elements. And we can figure out what stars are made out of. And so by doing that, we can determine that that star has the same proportions of these different impurities that the sun has, right? And its orbital path and the sun's orbital path, if you were to rewind them, it would be right by us, right? So it clearly is a solar sibling. It formed out of the same cloud of gas and dust as the sun, which I think is really cool that we've identified. So far, there's only one that's really strongly confirmed. There are a few other candidate stars. Last time I checked, I could check again. But I find the idea of identifying solar siblings to just be way cool. It's just a really, really cool concept. It's really neat that that's happened. While we're over here, we can also talk a little bit about this guy right here, Messier 13. So this is a different kind of star cluster. So there's open star clusters, and there's what it's called globular star clusters. And I'm going to pull this one up, Messier 13. There's a good picture of it. This is a good picture of it right here. Yeah, also called the Hercules cluster. This was taken by Carsten Frenzel from Deutschland. Creative Commons 2.0 attribution there. All right, so this is the Hercules globular cluster. And as you might notice, there is an absolute ton of stars in this cluster. You also might have noticed that it's ball-shaped. It's sort of spherical. That's why we call it a globular cluster. Globular comes from globulus, meaning globe, ball, right? And it's just made out of an absolute ton of stars. The way that globular star clusters form is not quite the same as open star clusters, because nowadays open star clusters form, right? They form from a cloud of gas, bunch of stars form in it, and they're all kind of loosely associated. It's thought that globular star clusters are the result of star formation in the early universe when there were much denser and larger gas clouds to work with than what we have now. And so these stars have a much stronger gravitational pull on each other. There's a lot of them there, so their mutual gravitation holds them together so they don't drift away over time like open star clusters do. So the term we use in astronomy is we would say that they are gravitationally bound, right? Now, one thing you might notice is there are blue stars in here. And you might say, well, Dave, didn't you say that blue stars indicate that something is young, right? Isn't that the indication? And if these things formed in the early universe and they're not still actively forming stars, shouldn't there not be any blue stars in them? So the term for these are blue stragglers is actually what they're called. And there are different hypotheses as to why they're here, because you would think this wouldn't form. And one of the hypotheses that has a decent amount of weight to it and is actually kind of interesting is that these may actually be the result of the fact that the stars are so densely packed in here that you actually get stellar collisions, where you'll get stars that actually pull each other in and then merge and add their masses together. And now this new big heavy star burns hotter and is now blue, right? And so that these may actually not have formed as blue stars, but became blue stars through merger events, which I think is really interesting. There's also the possibility that these could have been captured, that as this globular cluster is moving through the galaxy and it passes close to other stars, it brings them in and adds them. And so it occasionally adds blue stars as well. I don't know if I'm as convinced that that's the case as the merger thing. All right. Well, we've been hanging out for quite a while. I don't see any new questions in the chat. I've kind of run out of things to talk about. My throat is honestly kind of killing me. So I'm just going to go ahead and call it here. But I want to thank you guys so much for joining me. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to do these live streams, and you guys make it so worth it. I hope you have a wonderful night and keep looking up. It appears we have one more question. Planet 9. Talking about the possibility of a ninth planet in the solar system. Okay, so that actually is a really good question. So Planet 9, there's hypothesized that there could be a ninth planet, not Pluto. Pluto's no longer considered a planet, but a ninth planet out beyond the Kuiper Belt. It would be very big, actually, and that this planet, its gravitational influence is why so many comet orbits are lined up. So if you remember earlier when I was talking about the bar feature in a lot of spiral galaxies, that gravitational interaction will normalize the orbits and line them all up the same way. Well, there are a lot of like dwarf planets and things in our own solar system that are also aligned in this way, right? And so this implies the existence of a large source of gravity beyond the Kuiper Belt that is normalizing these orbits. That's kind of tugging on them and dragging them and causing them all to bunch up in one direction, right? So that they all kind of resonate with each other. And as Cooper's pointed out, there have been computer simulations done that strongly support this model. That if you have a bunch of randomly arranged comet and dwarf planet orbits, that a large mass object out beyond the Kuiper Belt could normalize those orbits. The difficulty is this object would orbit incredibly slowly out there. So it would be difficult to find, because mainly the way we find a planet is the way we used to find them back in the day. You look at a piece of sky and see if one of the dots moved, right? And then you track that and you calculate what its orbit would be, what its mass must be, whatever, and you figure out what it is. Is it an asteroid? What is it? And so if this thing is out there, it's moving incredibly slowly, it might be very difficult to image. It probably is in some of our images, and we've just mistaken it for a star, or maybe not. The space is huge. I mean, where are you going to point your telescope? There's a huge sky out there. So it's proven very difficult to actually find this object. And yeah, and Cooper points out that Neptune was its existence was originally hypothesized based on the orbit of Uranus, right? So there is some precedent for predictive planet hunting. It's in my car, but I actually have a board game called The Search for Planet X. Highly recommend it. It's a board game where it's like a Sudoku puzzle almost. You're trying to puzzle out where Planet X is, and it uses an app, and you can be like, I want to look for comets in this piece of sky, and then there's like logic rules, like comets can only be on prime numbers or whatever, and you kind of start to work it out, and you have to try and figure out where Planet X is, but the other players are also trying to find it before you do. It's a really cool board game. But yeah, I think the Planet 9 is very much a possibility. It would be really exciting if we found it in my lifetime. Unfortunately, at present, we don't really have any direct evidence of it, other than we don't have any direct evidence. We have the indirect evidence of its effect on other objects in the solar system that strongly suggests it's out there, but we don't have any direct observation of that object itself, unfortunately. Okay, very cool. Now we got that last question in, and now I really will go ahead and call the stream. So thank you again, and have a wonderful night.